Hello and welcome to Recognising Intervals. The original concept behind the idea was to allow students who were sitting theory exams to get the right answers, basically. There are lots of information on the internet, a lot of it conflicting, a lot of new and strange ideas. However, this is the one you want to be watching if you want to get it right. Really important that you understand your keys, test yourself out as quick as you can. B major, 5 sharps, F, C, G, D, A, and E flat major, 3 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat, etc, etc. Okay, make sure you understand your keys. If you don't, go to the lesson that teaches you how to learn your major scales and keys. Quite simply, an interval is a gap between two notes. Instead of saying it's so many centimeters apart or so many inches apart, we use the word interval. And you've got to do two things. You've got to determine the size of the interval, and then after that, each size has a different type. Okay. This is just an example of how it would look on certain instruments. Just a couple of instruments to show you. The piano, indicating E up to B and D up to F, and on the guitar neck, using the 6th string, the F to the A and the C to the E. We tend to use the piano keyboard as it's quite graphic, and obviously on a piano keyboard only one pitch note can be found in any one place, unlike other instruments such as the guitar. Now, quite simply, the size to deal with first of an interval is determined by counting how many letter names inclusively from the lower note up to the upper note. And obviously, if the two notes you're given for any reason contain sharp or flat signs, you just ignore those and count inclusively the letters only. Now, you've got sizes that range in intervals from a second to an eighth. You will see sizes larger than this in certain texts, and also the use of a unison or a gap of 1, and these will be dealt with further on. Let's have a look at counting the gap size now. So example number 1, over on the left hand side here, E up to upper note A. Now we always go from the lower note, okay? Doesn't matter what order that falls in. Whether on the staff you see the two notes, the first one is the higher of the two, you still always go from the lowest note. So it's E is the lower note, A is the upper note. Inclusively, that adds up 4. So there, that interval will be a fourth. Example number 2, looking at the D up to an upper note C sharp. Notice we ignore the sharp sign and we continue from D to C, will give us a 7th. Example number 3, lower note A flat, upper note F sharp, inclusively, and adds up to 6 letter names, therefore the interval of a 6th. Let's see how good you can do just to find the gaps. Let's see the first one. I'll give you a couple of seconds to look at each one, just to find the letter names. Okay. And just to refer you to the last bar, you'll notice the upper note becomes first, the lower note becomes second. We're still going from the E up to this upper note here. Okay. Now, sometimes Roman numerals are used to replace traditional numbering, such as 1 to 8. So there you'll see the number 3. They sometimes use the Roman numeral for 3, which is 3 eyes, etc. Let's look at the type that we can find now. So for example, you can find, if you find a third, you can have different types of a third. If you find a sixth, you can have different types of a sixth. Okay, so I want you to look at the following slide, try and memorize this information. Now, although it looks really simple and almost childlike, if you get this family into your head, and it's a stereotype family in order of how tall they are or how big they are. Diminish the dog being the smallest, augmented dad being the tallest, minor Mickey being the second to smallest, and major mum having the word yes. She's what we would call our yes character. So just answer these if you can. Who was the tallest? Who was the shortest? Who was the second to tallest? Who had the word yes after their name? Who was the second to shortest? Who was one bigger than the yes character? Who was two smaller than the yes character? Now, part of the little scenario is occasionally major mum, that's our yes character, takes minor Mickey shopping. So because augmented dad is a terrible cook, can't look after himself, major mum asks her mother, or nan, to come and look after the dad for the day, to cook tea, and obviously diminish the dog. So now our family will look like this. You notice minor Mickey and major mum, the yes character, replaced by perfect nan, who in this particular scenario is the yes character. So therefore the family now is diminished as the smallest, augmented as the largest, and slap bang in the middle is perfect nan, who in this one again is the yes character. Same as before, in this scenario, who's the tallest? Who is the shortest? Who has the word yes written after their name? Who is one smaller than yes? And who is one bigger than diminish the dog? Now, assume you can now tell the size of an interval, that's counting the letter names. Each size, as we said, has a different type, and you'll hear words such as diminished, minor, major, augmented, and perfect, just like the families. They're used to describe the type of interval, so you may see intervals described as a perfect fifth, or an augmented sixth, etc. And again, sometimes you might find they're abbreviated and using Roman numerals instead, such as aug 6. So, if your interval size is a second, it could be a diminished, a minor, major, and augmented. If it's a third, it could be diminished, minor, major, augmented. If it's a fourth, it could be diminished, perfect, augmented. Fifth, it could be diminished, perfect, augmented. It could be diminished, got it? No. Bit tricky, that one. Might be easier to remember that all interval sizes have the option of being the smallest, diminished, or the biggest, augmented, but not always major, minor, and perfect. Okay, the availability changes depending on what size it is. So if the interval is a second, third, sixth, or seventh, it can be any of the family except nan. So in other words, it can be diminished, minor, major, or augmented, just not perfect. But if the interval is a fourth, fifth, or eighth, then you can't have a major or a minor. You can only have diminished, perfect, or augmented. Major and minor replaced by perfect for this size. You got it? Still not? Here's the easy way to remember it. If the interval is a 4, 5, and 8, your nan's home. In other words, if the interval is a fourth, a fifth, or an eighth, you can only have a diminished, a perfect, or an augmented. If it's any of the others, a second, a third, a sixth, or a seventh, then that's when you don't have the choice of your nan. You only have a diminished, a minor, a major, or an augmented. So to remember, 4, 5, and 8, nan's home. So, if the interval size is either 4th, 5th, or 8th, you can only choose from this family. And again, if it's any of the others, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 6th, or the 7th, it'll be one of the family, just not the nan. Let's look at some intervals. E to A, example 1, D to F sharp, example 2, E to D, example 3, F sharp to D flat, example 4, C to A sharp, example 5, and F sharp to E. I beg your pardon, E to F sharp. Now, ask yourself the first of 3 important questions. Now, as you've got the previous information, you ask 3 important questions. Number 1, what is the size of the interval and what can it be? In other words, what is the availability? So in the first example, the lower note is E, the upper note is A. When you count it, it becomes a fourth. What type of fourths could we possibly have? Well, at 4, 5 and 8, Nan's home, so therefore it's a diminished, or a perfect, or an augmented. It can't be a major or a minor. Example 2, lower note D, upper note F sharp. Counting the letter names, it's a third. It can be diminished, minor, major, or augmented now, but it can't be a perfect. Third one, lower note E, upper note D, it's a seventh, and again, can be the diminished, the minor, the major, or an augmented, but as it's not a fourth, a fifth, or an eighth, it can't be a perfect. Question number 2. If you wrote out a major scale starting with the lower note as the tonic, would the upper note appear as one of the notes in that scale? Rather than saying, will the upper note appear as one of the notes in that scale, we say, is the upper note diatonic to the lower note? Let's have a look at the first example. Lower note E, upper note A. We ask, is the note A, the upper note, one of the notes in the scale of E major, or should it be sharpened or flattened? So in other words, is the note A diatonic to E major? And the answer is yes. Question 2. Is F sharp, the upper note, one of the notes in the scale of D major? And the answer is also yes. Number 3. The upper note D natural. Is that diatonic to the scale of E major? Is it one of the notes? If you wrote out the scale of E major, would it appear as one of the notes? And the answer is no. It should have been D sharp. If the answer to question 2 was yes, then there is no question 3. It would simply be the yes character. In other words, we look at the first example, E to A, count the letter names. It's a fourth. What can we have? Well, at 4, 5 and 8, Nan was in, so therefore it can be either a diminished or a perfect or an augmented. It can't be a major or a minor. Question number 2. Is the upper note one of the notes in the scale of E? Is it diatonic? Is A diatonic to E major? The answer is yes. Therefore, remembering your family, who was the yes character? Perfect. The answer is perfect fourth. Number 2. Question 1. From D to F, F sharp, is 3 letter names. What's the availability? Well, it's not a 4, 5 and 8, so therefore it can't be a perfect, so therefore it's diminished, minor, major, or augmented. Question 2. Yes, F sharp is diatonic to D major. It is one of the notes in the scale of D major. Therefore, looking at the availability, who is the yes character? Major. Therefore, D to F sharp is a major third. Question 3, or example 3. First question, E to D is a seventh. Availability, diminished, minor, major, or augmented, but no perfect. Question 2, no, the note D is not in the scale of E major. It should really be D sharp to be diatonic to E. If your answer to question 2 was no, in other words, it wasn't the diatonic note, then your question 3 will be, what has happened to the diatonic note? Well, the diatonic note is D sharp. What's happened to D sharp in this example? D sharp has been brought down by 1 step to D natural. Therefore, the diatonic note has stepped down 1. Therefore, the diatonic note that stepped down 1 has actually stepped down 1 from the family member who is the yes character. In other words, had it been a D sharp in the example, it would have been the yes character, namely major mum. But in this example, it stepped down 1 from major mum, stepped down in height goes, or size goes down to minor Mickey. Therefore, this interval is a minor seventh because the size of the gap has reduced from E to D sharp, has reduced from E to D, making the gap one smaller. Here is a convenient flow chart for you to try and use for revision purposes. Here's the first one. What size? Count the letter names. What is the availability? Is it major and minor, or is it the perfect? Is it 4, 5 and 8, or is it one of the other ones? Is the upper note diatonic to the lower note? Is it one of the notes in the scale of the lower note? If it's yes, it's the yes character. If it's no, what's happened to the diatonic note? And adjust your answer from the yes character. Let's look at some other examples. F sharp lower note to D flat upper note. Counting the letter names inclusively produces a sixth. The availability of the sixth is a diminished, a minor, a major, or an augmented, no perfect. Is D flat the upper note diatonic to the scale of F sharp? The answer is no. Question 3, therefore, is what has happened to the diatonic note? The diatonic note should have been D sharp. The diatonic note of D sharp has actually stepped down 2 steps, making the gap or the interval 2 steps smaller from the yes character. Therefore, when we step down 2 steps, it becomes diminished. Therefore, F sharp to D flat is a diminished seventh. Here's a second example. C is the lowest note, up to A sharp produces a sixth again. Is A sharp diatonic to C major? The answer is no. What has happened to the diatonic note? It has stepped up 1 step. 1 step up from the yes character is augmented. Therefore, C to A sharp is an augmented sixth. Do you notice the only thing we're doing with the key signature in each example is using it to establish what the note is. Nothing to do with the key of the interval. E to F sharp. Notice even though the upper note comes first on the score, still regard the lower note as the interval key. In other words, E to F is a second. Availability gives us either a diminished, a minor, a major, or an augmented. Is F sharp in the scale of E major? Yes. So it's the yes character again. Major second. Now, we mentioned at the beginning you can have intervals that are larger than an eighth. You might see them as a ninth, a 10th, 11th, a 12th, a 13th, etc. When you find they're greater than an eighth, we call them a compound interval. If you notice on the example, the lower note is E flat, the upper note is B natural, but it's greater than an octave. Therefore, this is a compound interval. The easiest way to work these out is to work it out exactly the same as you've just been doing, but with the exception of thinking that it's within the compass of an octave. So E to B, count the letter names as a fifth. Use your fingers if necessary. The availability can be either a diminished, a perfect, or an augmented, not a major or minor. Question 2, is B diatonic to E flat major? In other words, is B natural in the scale of E flat major? The answer is no. What has happened to the diatonic note? Well, it should have been B flat, so it's actually stepped up 1 to B natural. So therefore, 1 up from the yes character, augmented. All we do now is we've established that E flat to B natural is an augmented fifth. Because it's outside the compass of an octave, we call it compound. So we insert the word compound. Therefore, in this example, this is a compound augmented fifth. And here's another example. C sharp to G sharp above the octave using the bass clef to the treble clef. C to G is a fifth, compound. Availability, diminished, perfect, or augmented. Is G sharp one of the notes in the scale of C sharp major, i.e. is it diatonic? Yes. therefore it's the yes character. It's a perfect fifth. As it's outside the perimeter of an octave or an eighth, it becomes a compound perfect fifth. Sometimes you'll see alternative titles for compound intervals. It might include names such as a 10th or a 13th, etc. If this is required, work it out using exactly the same method, but at the end, instead of using the word compound, just count how many spaces there are between the notes, i.e. if it's going, say, from C to D outside the octave, that'll be 9. If it's going to the E, that'll be 10, etc., etc. So, for example, C sharp on the bass to G sharp on the treble. You still work it out as C to G. That's a fifth. The availability is diminished, perfect, or augmented. G sharp is diatonic to C sharp major. It is one of the notes in the scale of. So the answer is yes. So therefore our yes character makes it a perfect fifth. So we can now call it a compound perfect fifth. Or if you now count the real amount of steps, as in C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it's a 12th. So it's still a perfect 12th. Now, what happens if you come across one where the lower note doesn't exist as a tonic of a major key? In this example, we've used G sharp to D. Let's go through the motions. Okay, G to D is a fifth. So we're going to have a diminished, a perfect, and augmented. Is D diatonic to the scale of G sharp major? Well, there's no such key as G sharp major, so we've got a problem on our hands. Easy. Excuse me, just put your finger over the accidental and work it out as normal. So in other words, G to D is a fifth. It could be a diminished, a perfect, and augmented. D is diatonic to G, so the answer is yes, it's a perfect fifth, would be from G to D. But now what we have to do is take into account what the accidental does to the size of the gap. So we've just worked out using, if you look at the diagram, that gap from G to D is a perfect fifth. But by adding the accidental, in other words, the lower note takes a step up, it makes the gap one step smaller. Therefore, one step smaller than a perfect is a diminished. G sharp to D, therefore, is a diminished fifth. Don't forget, if it's a key signature making the lower note a non-tonic, such as this example where the lower note is G sharp due to the key signature, just imagine that it was an accidental and just work it out like the previous slide. A unison is basically the same pitch note, the same letter name, and it's a gap of one, such as C to C or C to C sharp. We can only really have two, and that's the perfect or the augmented. I've seen other texts that indicate diminished unisons, but I'm afraid I don't know how that works, as we can only have the same note to the same note, or the same note to one higher. If you took the lower one, it would become a different key. So in other words, if we took it and we said C flat to C, it would still be augmented. What you hear is not always what you see. For example, if you have done a practical examination or you're listening to any sort of two notes when you're trying to transcribe from a piece of music orally, it's most important to remember that what you hear is not always what you would intend to write down. Okay, so for example, when you look at this here, if we've got, as in the first one, C to E, you would hear a major third, and you would give that as a major third. However, when it's written down, sometimes the note E, if you look along one bar, might be called F flat. You're hearing the same thing, but it's a diminished fourth as far as writing it down is concerned. It's the same as if we keep the note E, but we change the name to enharmonically be the same, i.e. B sharp is the same as C, but you can't write it down the same. You can't name it the same. And the same for the last one. Now, do you notice the last one? We've got the word triple diminished fifth on there. That's an unusual one. When the interval is larger than augmented or smaller than diminished, sometimes you find the size of an interval, for example, in this example, a fourth, and you find it's 2 steps bigger than the S character. So you go up 1 to become augmented. Where do you go when you become 2? And the same there. So such as, here's an example, E flat to A sharp. Okay, E flat to A sharp. Just pause the slide, we'll try and work that out. Here's the answer. E flat to A sharp, in effect, gives you a fourth. The availability is a diminished, a perfect, augmented. A sharp is not diatonic to E flat. The diatonic note has actually gone up by 2 steps. So from A flat, it's gone to A, and then A has gone to A sharp. That's 2 up from the S character. So 2 steps more, we would indicate that as the first step higher would be the augmented, the second step higher would be a double augmented. If there happens to be 3 steps, you get triple. So in this particular case, E flat to A sharp would be a double augmented fourth. It is an enharmonic interval. Again, what you would hear would be E flat to B flat would be a perfect fifth, but this is an example of an interval that does not transcribe the same as listening to it orally. Second example, C sharp to F flat. Again, it's a fourth. The availability is the same as before, a diminished, a perfect, augmented. Is F flat diatonic to C sharp? No, it's not. The diatonic note stepped down 2 steps. Therefore, from F sharp, it goes down to a diminished and then down to a double diminished. You might need to write an interval. If any case you're given this particular problem, whether this be for examination or for other, if you had to write an augmented fourth from E flat. First of all, find the diatonic note. In this example, the 4th note up in E flat would be A flat. This would be your yes character. And then you just adjust it to make it either augmented or diminished. So if it's augmented, you would put a natural sign in, creating it an A natural. Well, if you wanted it diminished, you'd have to either put a double flat sign in, or you'd have to raise the E flat. Sometimes when you're actually scoring or you're needing to use intervals for orchestration purposes, certain instruments you require to transpose down by an interval. You might need to go into concert pitch, or you don't need to go from concert pitch. And you need to find out what an interval is down. So here's an example of what a note, it's a major third down from B flat. Now looking at the piano, you might look at that and think, yeah, okay, it's G flat. What is it, F sharp? Right, okay, I can see it, I can hear it, but which one do I choose? Okay, the easiest way to do this is that the major third down from B flat will give you exactly the same key note as going up a minor sixth. Now, I'll explain this further. When you invert an interval, you have 2 steps. The size will always add up to 9. So if you need to go down a fifth, that will go the same as going up a fourth. If you need to go down a third, it will be the same as going up a sixth. If it's a major, that will then become a minor. So if you're down a major third, that's up a minor sixth. If you're down a major second, you'll be up a minor seventh. And a major will become a minor, vice versa, and diminished will become an augmented and vice versa. And a perfect will remain a perfect. So following the 2 steps, down a major third is the same as going up a minor sixth. Major becomes minor and vice versa, and they always add up to 9. So the answer down a major third from B flat is G flat. That's exactly the same as going down a major third or up a minor sixth will give you the same key note. If you want to pause it and try using these examples, jot them down on some manuscript paper and the answers will come next. Okay, just need to name the intervals, and then the bottom line gives you some really quite tricky ones using different clefs, etc., etc. Be careful of the clefs, be careful of the key signatures. Again, here's your answers. Rather than narrating through all the answers, pause this, click it back, have a look at the answers. Thanks very much for watching. I really hope this has been helpful to you and has cast any doubt over different videos that you might have come across. My name's Pagan, and if you want to look out for other lessons that I've done, just type into YouTube Pagan Music. Thanks very much for watching.